We encourage you to hit the subscribe button right now so you can listen to more podcasts of Operation Truth. Ladies and gentlemen, we do want to hear from you, so we encourage you to email us directly at operationtruthofficial@gmail.com. I want you to know that your messages are likely to be heard, addressed, and listened to on air.
Operation Truth, the show they don't want you to see. Now, here's your host, Lou.
Hi, everyone. This is Lou Palumbo with Tom Fuentes, my co-host. This is Operation Truth. It's very simple. We're just going to tell you the truth. We don't expect you to just buy off on it. We encourage you to do your own investigating. You might find out what we're telling you is startling true. Last podcast, I mentioned that we were going to have a discussion that Tom is intimately knowledgeable of regarding what's required of Chinese students when they come to America for the purpose of education. Tom, if you're there, I'd like you to give us a little insight as to what they're required to do once they've hit the United States for learning purposes.
Well, Lou, the Chinese have they had 360,000 students in the U.S. using student visas to go to school. Now, some were high school students, most were college students here. China has recently issued a new regulation to their students. Before they can come to the United States, they have to agree to report back to the government what they're finding here. U.S. policies, U.S. security systems, whatever it might be, they're required to report that. They should go to the nearest consulate, Chinese consulate, or the Chinese embassy in Washington, D.C., and file a report, basically. Here's what I saw, what the U.S. did. Here's what I went through going through TSA or entering a government building or in a school or some other facility, and report that back. Now, the FBI used to, going back to when I was in the Bureau, and I retired at the end of 2008, but at that time, we had a very extensive program monitoring Chinese, the professors, the students that came over, what were they doing, trying to keep track of them not stealing our secrets and sending it back to China, whether it was how to make the latest jet aircraft or nuclear weaponry or even scientific experiments, whatever it might be. We tracked that. We tracked the Chinese students and professors that appeared to be conducting that type of espionage in the U.S. Now, 2 years ago, under President Biden, he eliminated that program. So that program has been canceled to monitor the spying that's going on and the material that's being sent back to China. Now you have the Chinese students being tasked, or anybody that comes here on a visa from China, being tasked to report back, basically to be unofficial spies. Whatever you see, whatever you learn, send it back. Go to the nearest consulate. So if you're in Los Angeles or San Francisco, where you have a lot of Chinese students attending universities in California, then it's very convenient for them to go to their nearest consulate and report in and send that information back to China, back to Beijing. So there's other things that the Chinese do is monitoring their own students using their social credit system. Now, I spoke about this before. I'll give the example again. A young Chinese employee of one of the high-tech companies in the San Francisco area, and this company provides tremendous services to their employees: free food, free, pet services, trim their dog, whatever it might be. Anyway, the manager of the facility finds out from another employee, hey, do you know so-and-so, this female Chinese employee, she walks to work. Here they're providing limo service, pick them up, take them home, whatever they want. So the boss calls her in. What are you doing? We'll send a limo to get you. You could stay as long as you want. When it's time to go home, the limo will take you home. She said, no, I can't do that, because my phone is issued to me by the Chinese government, and the phone tracks the amount of exercise I get. And so if I don't walk to work, and since I'm working in here all day and into the evening hours, there's no chance for me to really get enough exercise. But if I let you send a car and pick me up, I won't get any exercise. And the Chinese government monitoring my phone and the amount of exercise I get will get a hold of me and say, we're rescinding your visa, your work permit to even go to the United States. You're not getting enough exercise. You have to come home. And that's an example of them monitoring their own citizens to see what they're doing, how much exercise they're getting, and if they're not getting enough, according to what the Chinese government thinks is enough, they have to go home. So those are examples of how China tries to monitor and regulate their own people that are in the United States, whether they're students in a university or on a work permit for a major high-tech company like we have here in the U.S.
Tom, let me ask you this, if I may. How big a threat do you feel China is to the United States current day?
Well, I think in a way it's a huge threat because they've been stealing our technology for many, many years. They're still trying to do that. The number of, when I was in the FBI, we were well aware of the spying efforts of the Chinese government in the United States. And we tracked the number of individuals that we had identified as Chinese spies. And some of the highest percentage of them were at high-tech facilities, either at our companies that were doing high-tech research in the computer industry, let's say, or one of the physical locations that had a huge number was outside of Dayton, Ohio, at the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Now, that base is where they do the high-tech research that puts in the avionics and the high-tech systems that go in our military aircraft. So fighter jets, for example, the pilot operating the jet, looking at his high speed or whatever display, heads-up display on the windshield, can target somewhere 100 miles away and send a rocket to demolish that, whatever it might be. China wants that technology. Now, one of the things the United States does when we sell, you hear much talk about sending F-16s to Ukraine. When we sell an allied country one of our jet aircraft, whether it's an F-16 or some other model, when we sell them a package that has only about 70 or 80% of the technology that our military uses. That way, if that jet gets stolen, or if that country turns against us, and our planes have to go into combat against those planes, we'll win. Their rockets can't be aimed 100 miles away, only 50, 60 miles away. All of the other technology in that aircraft is very limited. So what happens is the countries, our allied countries that get those aircraft, then initiate huge espionage efforts in the United States to get the rest of the package. Now, I was an assistant in charge in San Francisco in the mid-1990s for 3 years. We had an auto dealership in the San Francisco area that was home base to one of the countries, their espionage efforts, that we had sold them military gear, and they were trying to steal from us the rest of the package to go. And we've had that with many allied countries where we've sold military equipment to them. Now, right now, we're hearing that in Europe, many of the countries of NATO have U.S. jets. They have F-16s. They have some of the other military gear, HIMARS missiles, other sensitive equipment. The equipment that we've put there, if it's on a U.S. military base and it's our equipment and we're operating it, that's one thing. But if we've sold that jet to Poland or France or some other country, we don't sell them the whole package. And so then they do what they can to spy on us to get the rest of what we didn't give them. So that's kind of how that works. But the Chinese tracking their students here, it's to let them know we're watching you and we expect you as a good student, good student or as a good citizen of China, we expect you to help us by getting technology, sending it to us.
So let me ask you about this balloon that traversed the United States that basically went unaddressed until I think it got over Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. I'm trying to figure out what it is that this government didn't understand in regards to China. I mean, the audacity, that is almost tantamount to an act of war. What have you heard on that?
I haven't heard anything from any official source on that, but unofficially, I've heard that what China was trying to do was assess what kind of an attack they could launch against us out of a balloon. And you say, wow, that's unheard of. Who would have ever done that? Well, Japan did that to the United States in World War II. They launched several hundred balloons from Japan that went up into the atmosphere, were blown over to where they came down in the United States. One of those balloons came down in Oregon, and a pastor and his wife holding a picnic with some of the churchgoers that were with them. They're out having a picnic. One of these balloons comes right down in the field next to him. And before he can tell the kids, stay away from that, don't touch it, somebody goes over and boom, it blows up, a Japanese weapon. So then the warnings went out to be careful of these balloons. But the idea of it, during World War II, Japan initiated a number of chemical attacks experimenting on small villages in China. So they had a laboratory facility in China, and they were putting these chemicals, biological weapons, anthrax, and other deadly materials in these planes like crop dusters, and they would fly low, over the city or village, and then release all of this stuff. And then they wanted to see how many people died, how many Chinese citizens died from the release of these chemicals and biological weapons against the Chinese people. So my theory, this is mine, it's not coming from the official government, but one of the things we always talk about, you're supposed to think outside the box. You're supposed to think, well, what else could be the story here? I think one of the stories could be that China wanted to see if it was feasible. The next pandemic that they're going to start, it might not be feasible to spread it through people and wait till they fly to these other countries like the US and Europe and spread the disease, spread the pandemic. But following the programs that went on during World War II, what if these balloons flying low and steadily over the United States, what if they use that to inject anthrax and COVID and any other biological or chemical warfare against citizens of the US? And if they flew low over the United States, would we allow it? Would we let them just keep flying and let them decide where they're going to release whatever they're carrying? So I think that there was more to these weren't just innocent balloons. China's got satellite coverage like we do. Their satellites in space can read the license plate number of a car on the ground in the United States. So they didn't need balloons to spy on us or to spy on our military facilities or any of that. All of the other technology they have is way more than adequate to learn what they need to about that. But the difference, I think, was that China experienced Japan injecting lethal weaponry into their citizens by low-flying aircraft. And then Japan trying to launch bombs, which did land in the United States, just that one actually killed 5 people in Oregon. But the idea to me, is that we'll test this balloon system and see if the next pandemic that's launched in the United States, they wouldn't need airports, they wouldn't need health facilities, people not being able to get into the US or other countries. What about these balloons? Could that work? Send them up with all of the pandemic materials they would need and see if that would work to invade our country.
Tom, independent of the episode itself, the brazen nature that China would attempt an exploit like this, and they probably realized it would go completely unaddressed, which is quite a critique of this administration. I would have at least sent up an escort with it, fighter jets, something to make some show of force or response to this. I mean, talk about embarrassing, but
our government had an extreme fear that balloon was carrying some material that would be very harmful to the people on the ground of the United States. And that because they didn't want to shoot it down over the United States. They didn't want to disable it. They waited till it was over the ocean, just offshore in the Atlantic Ocean, shoot it down there, the stuff will fall in the ocean. It's not going to be able to kill a lot of people if there was dangerous material on that balloon. They didn't know, but they treated it like it did or it could have. And so that was the lesson to the Chinese government. Here's the United States in action if you launch a balloon over America.
Well, I tell you, Tom, the leading question to this conversation was, how big a threat does China pose to the United States? And I know we haven't spoken about it yet, but we need to talk about your borders, because my personal opinion, the two greatest threats we have today is the southern border of the United States, which has been outlined by Christopher Wray, and China, tragically, and we seem to be courting them both, interestingly enough. I don't know what the line in the sand is with this administration. I almost feel like our government's ineptitude causes it to become unrecognizable. I just don't understand what the agenda is here. It's clearly not one that lends itself to the preservation of the United States or what's in the best interest of our children. And as long as
and that's what makes you wonder, is our government, starting at the presidency, are they that stupid, or are they that inept or incompetent or lazy or whatever it might be? We don't know. That's a good question.
Tom, the one thing I am noticing, and I hate to say it in plain terms, but I'm listening to a lot of lies. And I listened to the last two speeches of the president. One, he was alluding to our democracy being threatened by a Donald Trump type person, not promoting Donald Trump, let me be clear, not endorsing anybody. If anybody's engaging in anti-democratic activity, you better look at the Democrats, because they're assaulting your Constitution. The other issue was they are fear-mongering. We're talking about in Charleston, South Carolina, about white supremacy. I don't know what country they're living in. I'm around an enormous amount of people every day, especially when I'm in New York and in my travels through my business. I brush up against a lot of people, a lot of different environments, cultures, etc. I don't see this big white supremacy movement. Do we have it going on in the United States? Probably. Is this a racist country? No, because we've got better time than to hate people for the color of their skin or their religious denomination or their cultural lifestyle. A lot of these fears that they're selling, and that's what I really dislike the most about what's going on today. We're pitting each other against each other with this fear mongering. We're throwing out this thing about white supremacists and a threat to your democracy. We want to suspend your civil rights, it looks like, when you go to charge someone running for president and you deny him due process. Interesting question. Tragically, I don't know what the end game is for the country. I'm concerned we're not going to survive this lunacy. I lend this problem to the fact that we've allowed people from all over the planet to come to this country, and we just can't juggle everybody's agenda. I want to kind of go off on another discussion just briefly.
Before we do that, Lou, the issue of who's coming in and what we know or don't know about them, obviously 6 or 7 months ago, Christopher Wray said that the open border, southern border, is a threat to our security. We don't know who's coming in. We don't know where they've gone and all of that. Well, that's all true. What happened as a result of that? Nothing.
Nothing.
So nothing was done. He didn't, obviously, it wasn't enough of a bully pulpit that the others in the administration or that senators and congressmen would look at that, or the president, and say, that's true. That's a huge threat. Now, it came up in wider discussion after the October 7th attack in Israel by Hamas. Then people said, well, how many Hamas people could have crossed our border since it's been wide open for 3 years? And by the way, Hamas and Hezbollah have training facilities in Mexico, so they could walk over. Where are they? Are we tracking them? Probably not. We don't know what they're doing. Now, there was a reporter that followed and filmed a group of young Chinese men. This is only about 2-3 weeks ago. And he meets up with them. They're at a hotel in Columbia, South America, sorry. He meets up with them, and they've had their funding paid for by somebody to come to the United States, and they look very fit, young, military age, carrying, their fine-looking bags and clothing and all of that. So he follows them. They're eating in a restaurant in the hotel, and then they go from there and they get on buses And make a long story short, he films them in the United States, standing on the edge of side of a street, all in a line with American border personnel watching them in their green uniforms, Border Patrol or other members of U.S. law enforcement. Now then, that's not bad enough. We don't know where they're going to go. They're going to come in. They're going to get a court date of 8 years from now to come back and check on their asylum request or refugee status. Meantime, United States Senator from Illinois, my home state originally, Dick Durbin, gives a speech on the Senate floor. This is about 2 weeks ago now. I watched the video of it. Durbin says, we can't seem to recruit enough people to join our military. They're short-staffed. And now you have these Chinese young men. Why don't we put them in our military? They could serve in our military, and within a couple of years, they'd be eligible to be United States citizens. And then others that aren't military fit and capable, they could work on our farms. They could do work that Americans don't want to do. This is Dick Durbin saying that in the Senate, on the floor of the Senate, recommending our military take in all these hundreds and hundreds of young Chinese men to join our military. That way they can become citizens, and they'll be so grateful. He didn't say the rest of this. I'll finish his thought. They'll be so grateful for the opportunity that they'll become loyal Democrats and vote for the Democrats for letting them in and letting them become citizens. Now, we don't know, what are we going to do with all of these young men? Call Beijing and say, what do you know about these guys? Are they members of the CCP, Communist Party, or are they're refugees? They just wanted to get out of China in the worst way, and they couldn't wait to become U.S. citizens because they value freedom and democracy, and that's why they're here. Well, what do you think the answer to that is? Do we know?
Dick Durbin seems to be involved in blocking a lot of things. I mean, he was attempting to block the release of those who were involved with Jeffrey Epstein, who I had the displeasure of brushing up against. And I will tell you, interestingly enough, I got to know Ghislaine Maxwell fairly well, and independent of what we've come to learn about her, which is quite disturbing. She was actually quite a lovely person, a lot of fun, attractive, great sense of humor, great personality. That's Mr. Durbin, for some reason, was compelled to block the information that would identify people that probably participated in some of his activities that shouldn't have. But, Tom, I want to touch on something else, because they keep talking about our children and school safety, and that, about arming putting armed security on our learning environments and these academic environments. And I wonder if people are smart enough to realize what this says about your country, that we have so digressed or deteriorated that we need to put armed people like myself or Tom and any other number of people that have been in law enforcement in environments so your children can learn safety. Something went wrong here. And it's all attached to a very large lie, because we just had another mass shooting in Iowa, another individual that was able to acquire firearms when he shouldn't have. The solution to this problem, simple: put them through a vetting process, screening, training, education, and the law, same as there is law enforcement. Times have changed. You must change with the times, kind of like talking about a wall. Tragically, we need a wall, a physical wall, and a wall that involves technology, accountability for people coming and going. But it's quite a critique on the country that, your children today, I mean, I didn't grow up with armed people in my learning environment, and I know, Tom, you didn't either, but what happened here? We just glossed over this. We have no accountability. What happened in this country? I
think what happened was that you talked about indemnification. You have a situation created where if somebody comes into a school and causes extreme trouble in the past, when you and I were kids, the teacher would, grab that person and take care of it. So you had teachers that could discipline a student, even a stray student that wandered into that school. You had, above the teacher, you had assistant principals. Then you had principals. Then you had superintendents. You had this whole array. And then what happened 10 or 15 years ago, the people in those positions said, I don't want to be doing this stuff. I don't want to fight with someone. I don't want to get sued. I don't want to lose my house. I don't want to get fired. The school board won't back me up. Let's bring in trained police officers and sit them in our classrooms in some of the worst schools in the worst neighborhoods. Well, the problem with that was, and a lot of jurisdictions took trained uniformed police officers and assigned them to school patrol, assigned them to be in those schools. Well, what does that mean for people on the street? When you call 911, there's that many fewer police officers to respond to your 911 request because they're sitting in a school waiting for the next troublemaker so they can deal with that. And that's one of the difficulties of that idea. And you had people, going back through many shooting incidents, and I can remember studying many of them when I was on CNN for 10 years and being able to say, the number of cops that it would take to guard every entrance, even to one school, thinking of the high school I went to just outside Chicago, that it would take a couple dozen police officers to guard every one of those doors, every one of those entrances. And now multiply that times a couple 100,000 schools in this country. And you mentioned at the beginning, we have 800,000 police officers in the United States.
Law enforcement agents combined, federal, state, and local, Tom, 800,000. Go ahead.
No, I know. So it would take all 800,000 to secure our schools. That's what it would take. Because of all the multiple entrances, you have schools, you could picture a school where the football teams are out on the practice field and they have to come back through certain doors to get into the locker rooms. Then you have the public entrances. Then you have the student entrances. Then you have the delivery entrances for the material that's going to go to the cafeteria, let's say, for the meal preparation. So you have dozens and dozens of entrances that have to be guarded, because if you're on one and people come in through another one, it's not secure. We just don't have enough. Of all of those police officers, we don't have enough. If you tried to hire enough, there was a move 10 years ago. I remember getting ready to go on the air at CNN. That was when it was proposed. That was proposed that the teachers all be armed. Yeah. And this one school where you had a shooting, a mass shooting, the teachers were all women. So I go on the air and I say, okay, you want the teachers to all be armed. Where do they put the gun? If they're in a business suit or wearing a dress or a skirt or some other, how do they hide that gun? You can't put it in the desk drawer because a kid would grab it out of the drawer and use it. You can't carry it in a holster on a waistband like a Western Marshal. So there's going to have to be some way to do that. And who's going to train all these police officers? That particular school, I think it had something like 20 female officers and a female principal. What are they going to do with that? How are they going to arm them, equip them, train them? That's one school. And then multiply that throughout the country. And that was the dilemma back then. Well, a couple of weeks and a couple of months go by, there isn't another mass shooting. So that one kind of disappears. That move to arm our teachers, it went away. So it wasn't followed up on.
Tom, but it's just an interesting critique in general to think that we have to put armed people in the learning environments of our children. Something happened April 20th of 1999. It was called Columbine. That was our wake-up call. We've just turned a blind eye to it, intentionally misleading the public to think we have a gun problem. We have a gun management issue that needs to be spoken to, but we have a mental health problem in this country that is insurmountable. And it's the heavy lift that all of these people that we keep voting for conveniently duck and dodge. And at some point, we need to start to have a conversation about creating environments or institutions that we can treat people. The other thing, Tom, and you and I both know this, is that we're a little hamstrung with the HIPAA laws. I don't think the HIPAA law should apply if you have a mental health condition. I don't think you should be allowed to have access to firearms, mental or emotional disorder, until it's proven that you are, quote unquote, cured. And I don't know if all of these mental health conditions are curable. I'm not backgrounded clinically in that area. I just know we just keep going in a circle, throwing, terms around and yapping about assault rifle ban. It's not going to be any assault rifle ban in the United States, ladies and gentlemen. That's just a complete lie. We are intentionally misleading you so we can feed the narrative of people that need to hear about assault rifle bans. By the way, it's the tool that keeps this country free. Just look around the world. So I have to say to you, whether it's in Israel or a Ukraine or any number of these countries where their people live oppressed, like China, for example, and Russia. Their populations are pretty much disarmed, which means the government can just tap dance all over you, which is what they do, which I absolutely guarantee you would happen here if your population wasn't armed. The founding fathers were onto something. They realized that tool, the firearm, liberated this country back in 1776. And then the War of 1812, when Great Britain made another run at us, we had firearms again. Tragically, it's become a necessary evil. I implore you, if you are inclined to acquire a firearm, please get trained. Please read the law. Because if you mishandle a firearm in public, you display it irresponsibly, they can charge you with a crime like menacing or a felony, reckless endangerment. Tom and I are both familiar with these concepts as law enforcement agents. I know people have been charged with these crimes. But instead of telling us what the solution is to this problem, and there is one, we at least have to have the start of the conversation. And I remind everybody, back a year or so ago, whenever it was, for about 10 months, I was on a live radio show from 5 to 6 in Jacksonville. And every single person that came on that I asked the following were complying. I want to give you a concealed weapons permit, carry all over the United States, District of Columbia, all the U.S. territories. And if you really think you need an assault rifle, the same thing. Go through the vetting process we go through in law enforcement, Minnesota multiphasic screening, which is how I know it back from yesteryear. It's something different today. Rorschach, word association, interview with psychologists, psychiatrists. Then we'll give you what you need, but you also have to be trained the way we've been trained, and you have to read and understand the law. You read the vehicle and traffic law before you drive a car. Why wouldn't you read the law before you handle a firearm? For people that are living in another planet, guns aren't going anywhere. Sadly, it just isn't the case. They're being manufactured without registration, as I'm on this podcast speaking with Tom. That's the sad reality of the situation. Do our elected officials on either side of the aisle offer some type of viable resolution to this problem? No, it doesn't feed their agenda, or they don't seem to think it's important enough. I don't know what to say about a lot of this, except our kids are going to have some America in the future. Tom, I go back and to this issue with the borders. I don't know what people don't understand. You had 300,000 people illegally enter your country in December. I doubt we vetted 10% of them. I don't know how they figured out who was on the watch list, right? Or there was a no-fly on somebody. I don't know how they were able to do that, because they just flood into the country. They don't even stop to say hi to the Border Patrol agents. They just walk on by them and then they process them. This is so dangerous. I don't know a better word to use. It's dangerous. And for everybody listening, be you Republican or Democrat, tall or short, fat or skinny, white or black, Jew, Muslim or Catholic, when these incidents start in this country, and they're going to, because we've let people in that don't belong, they're not going to discern based on your politics, your religion, your lifestyle, your culture. We're going to have fatalities, folks. We had our wake-up call on 9/11. I know it's too many years in the distance now. It's going to happen again. Your FBI director is telling you on a regular basis. It's a concern, a heightened concern in law enforcement agencies across this country, like New York City, like LAPD. I don't know about Chicago. I can't speak to Chicago. There's something grossly wrong in that city. By the way, we didn't even talk about Washington, D.C. today, because it's in such dire straits, and it's the capital of your country. And it isn't safe for the FBI to go try to drive their cars. And I don't mean to laugh, or elected officials to leave their office a block away without worrying about being carjacked. There's something wrong, guys. And part of it has to do with the fact that we have a political party, the Republicans, that haven't gotten the memo. They have to soften their position on some of these socially sensitive topics and reach out to the minority community to convince them to trust you that you'll keep them safe, their children safe, first and foremost, and get their kids educated. You're doing nothing. You're sitting on your hands and you're posturing, and there's a lot of smoke and mirrors that go on. Tom, we could talk about these topics ad infinitum. I want to get into this discussion with the Ukraine again, because I don't think the American public have had their sense of decency assaulted appropriately as of yet. But they need to understand something. We've sent approximately $115 billion to the Ukraine. We want to send them $60 billion more dollars of U.S. money. And Tom, would you tell us what that money is being used for?
Well, it's being used to pay for their government. So Their employees are being paid with that. Their pensions are being paid. Their health care is being paid. It's basically their budget operating their government. And they've talked about that. So if we stop sending it, you had one of their senior officials 2 weeks ago basically saying, we need $500 million from the US government right away, or we're not going to be able to keep operating our government. And that's what they're talking about. We are operating their government. We've been operating it for some time now. So that's the issue with the Ukraine. Now, I think the other issue with Ukraine, and I've talked about this before, that, for almost 30 years in the FBI, among the many things, at one point for 5 years, I ran the FBI's entire organized crime program. So that was La Cosa Nostra in the United States. It was Russian organized crime, Asian, Chinese, Japanese, Ukrainian. And one of the bedrock requirements for organized crime to flourish, it requires corruption in the government. It requires people who are going to take money from these gangsters, whichever nationality they might be, and have them flourish. And then they don't go after them. The government doesn't prosecute them as strenuously or take them out like they should. Now, one of the things is that there is more than ample evidence of the amount of corruption between, I'll say specifically right now, Ukraine and Biden and the Biden crime family. Millions of dollars have been transferred to the Bidens, and then they've set up all of these LLCs, corporations, so that they could move the money all over the place, play a shell game with where that money came and which Biden benefited. So now you have the brother, the wife, everybody, their children, their grandchildren getting money and making money because of the contributions from the Ukraine. Now, an FBI informant in 2020, revealed by Senator Grassley, said that there are conversations, recorded conversations, between Ukrainian officials, 17 recorded conversations with Hunter Biden, and I believe 2 with Joe Biden himself, regarding the payment of this corruption money to the Biden family, to the Biden corporations. And one of the comments that one of the officials from the Ukraine said, oh, we're moving all this money and all these different corporations. It'll take them 10 years to figure out how we did this or where the money went. Well, okay, we're figuring it out. But the problem for the US with that is that then the people that corrupted the Bidens are in command. So when Zelensky tells Biden, I want another, which they just have done in the last few weeks, I want another $65 billion. Oh, okay, we'll try to get that for you. Biden doesn't hesitate to try to satisfy every whim of the Ukrainian government because he knows they can expose him, and they've got the tapes, they've got the evidence, they've got the financial transactions to show the level of corruption by the Bidens with Ukraine specifically. And that's not counting how many millions with China. Peter Schweitzer, a good friend of mine, and his investigators determined that they took in a minimum of $31 million in bribe payments from China. And then you've got a few others sprinkled in, Romania and a woman from Russia, some of that. So you have all of this money going to the Bidens. They've got now, the House committees have identified the documents that show it, the transfer statements from the banks, the SARS reports from the banks. And yet you have people, especially in the Democratic Party, saying, oh, no, that's not corruption. You're wrong. Really? Well, I'm telling you, the years that I had dealing with corruption when I was in the FBI, all the way up from street agent all the way to senior executive, it's corruption, period. And the Bidens have taken in a fortune, and the people that paid them have been getting their money's worth. It's been money well spent for them.
Tom, this lack of accountability just resonates in the government today. I always pose this little question, I should say, about Senator Biden taking classified documents and why that wasn't pursued. I got the whole thing with everybody trying to distort the realities of the vice president. Tom and I both know the vice president can't take documents either. But without even addressing that element of the conversation, as a U.S. Senator, he took documents. Why is there no concern of prosecution? I think I heard say something like when they asked for them, he gave them back. Let's try this one on for size. It was a felony. It was theft of classified information by a U.S. Senator. Could you imagine if all 100 U.S. senators engaged in this activity, they just decided arbitrarily to take classified information? But the bigger problem is we have multiple rules for different people. This is very simple, ladies and gentlemen. One set of rules universally applied. Doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or Republican. You cross the line, there's an accountability and there's a consequence attached to it. There seems to be no consequence for this individual. And sadly, there are a lot of questions that are being asked about his relationships with the University of Pennsylvania, Burisma, the Ukraine in general, China. You know, they say where there's smoke, there's fire. You know, I just hope that the Republicans are properly invested in this and not going after him because he's a Democrat president, but because he's a corrupt individual. And if Donald Trump is corrupt, then he should be held accountable too, guys. We can't keep having, you know, individuals being given a pass because they're parties in power. And that's what we have going on right now. It's amazing to think that during Bill Clinton's administration, he committed perjury over oral copulation sitting in the West Wing of the White House. And none of the Democrats thought this was something that warranted his removal from being president. And Bill Clinton was a pretty brilliant guy as far as running the government, balanced the budget, worked well with Newt Gingrich. You know, I think he had a lot of attributes. I think he's got some personal issues, which they're his problem and his wife's problem, until they intersect with the culture which they have with this young woman, Juanita Broderick, which alleges he raped her. But independent of that, he committed perjury. Mark Furman was convicted for perjury. Okay. Bill Clinton, I believe he was convicted. What were the consequences? Oh, they fined him. They disbarred him in the state of Arkansas from practicing law. This practice has to stop because this lends itself to the deterioration of the honor, integrity, and the trustworthiness of this government, which is in massive dosages right now, which is being led, by the way, by your media. We never talk about the media enough on this podcast because they are at the root of your problem. They carry every bit of information you're allowed to hear. That's it. There's no other sources of information. You're either reading it through the propaganda or you're listening to it with the propaganda. Why don't you just start telling the goddamn truth about what's going on here and let the truth take us where it takes us, independent of the politics, because we're going to lose our country. If you think I'm kidding, sit back and watch the show in the next couple of years. And I find no pleasure in saying that if we don't vote in a conservative, and I'm not talking about Donald Trump, because personally, my own opinion is that Donald Trump being president will be unhealthy for this country. He may fix your economy. He'll probably get your gasoline prices down again. He's probably going to balance out a little bit this craziness in our foreign policies. And I know he's going to shut this border, but he's going to tear the country in two. Another Biden, 4 years. This man is unrecognizable right now. I don't know where he stands politically. He's always been a somewhat conservative Democrat for all of his time serving in the Senate. He's not a particular fireball. He's been mediocre at best. He's not a dynamic leader or thinker at any point in time of his life. I know we liked him. That's why people voted Uncle Joe in. Look at the condition of your country, independent of who you think you like because they've got an R or a D before their name, guys. This is your children's future. You're playing with your children's future. In 2024, this election, this November, is going to be a defining moment for this country. And I'm going to tell you this right now. We won't be here in 4 more years of a Democrat regime. And I'm not anti-Democrat. My favorite president was John Kennedy. I like Robert Kennedy. I like Robert Kennedy Jr., even though he's not being given any airtime, which begs the question as to why isn't there anybody challenging Joe Biden? You have 8 or 9 people in the primaries initially for the Republican presidency slot, right? Only Joe Biden is the only competent, capable, rational, reasonable person that represent the Democrat platform. They won't even give him the courtesy, Robert Kennedy, of a primary debate. How is that democracy, ladies and gentlemen? They're so cavalier about throwing a term around that they threaten the most. You know, Robert Kennedy gets more airtime, correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, from Fox than he does from MSNBC and CNN and all the rest of the networks. No one wants to hear what this guy has to say. He's only one. Where are the rest of the Democrats? I didn't hear Elizabeth Warren's voice once, or Bernie Sanders, or Amy Klobuchar, or Julian Castro, or Beto O'Rourke. Where are all these people now? I see Gavin Newsom, suddenly he left the radar screen, and after a $68 billion deficit that's been disclosed, I don't know how in the wide world of sports you think you could lead this country. Let me just tell you something about California, ladies and gentlemen, as far as revenue generators, because I listened to the governor there boast about the fifth largest economy. I hear you. Half your produce and vegetables come out of California. You're with me? They have aerospace, the wine country. They have the entertainment industry. They have tourism. They have more revenue generators in the state of California than I have hair on my head. How are you in the red? It's very simple. You make $1 million, you spend $2 million. Tom and I spoke about this on the podcast. Tom spoke to it in greater detail, I believe, about more than 750,000 illegal immigrants, people that have broken our border, broken our laws to enter the country. We're now going to continue to take care of you with medical health care. I don't know why they can't discern between those individuals that have legitimate need to be here and those that don't. You know, we've broken our immigration policy. I listen to them wanting to blame the Republicans for this. I don't know what planet they're living on. This is not a Republican problem. It's a Democrat problem. And for you to just stand there and bold-faced lie to the American public and insult their intelligence is just shameful. But then again, I guess there's no boundaries we won't cross when it comes to shame. There's nothing like the truth, guys, the whole truth. I don't know what else to say to you in regards to this, but the country's in trouble. That's my honest opinion. I think, Tom, you'll agree with that.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I see no light. I tragically see no light at the end of the tunnel because, although Tom will not agree with me, I think we've overpopulated the country. I think 360 million people. We're not taking care of anybody. We certainly aren't taking care of our homeless, our mentally ill, our veterans. Only, interestingly enough, crazy man Donald Trump passed a law that allows a veteran to go to any hospital, not just a VA hospital, for treatment. Donald Trump did that. You like him, you don't like him. That's the truth. We don't take care of our children. We don't protect our children. But tragically, what's protecting your children has come down to putting armed people when they go to movie theaters, when they go to malls to shop, when they're in the academic environment, when they're in a playground. This is what we've done to our country, folks, and there's no accountability by the people we elect on either side of the aisle. More importantly, there's no remedy that they offer. I give you solutions to all of this. I gave you the solution as far as guns. I can give you the solution regarding the border. Close the border, manage the border in a way that will allow us to vet people. Please know this, guys. There are no information platforms. There are no databases in these foreign countries they come from. We can't figure out what countries they come from any longer that are going to supply us information regarding their criminality. I don't care about their finances or the DMV record, the driving record. I'm worried about criminality. They just grabbed some guy recently who had a murder warrant, I think out for Colombia or something at the border. This is getting to the point where it's not only ludicrous, it is dangerous. And it isn't an if, it's a when here. So I'm going to give you the closing remark, and we're going to close this podcast for today.
Okay, well, Lou, I agree completely that, we're allowing this flood of people to come in here. We can't properly vet them. And even if they were all coming from countries where we have a relationship with their police or with their intel service, the fact that we could get any of that information on a timely basis while they're standing in front of a border patrol officer in the middle of the desert in Texas or Arizona is just not practical. Now, when you come in legally through passport control, you flash your passport, or the passport officer scans your passport through the system. That passport makes an inquiry automatically into the United States criminal system to see if there's any outstanding warrants that are American warrants. It also scans Interpol system to see if there's an Interpol warrant issued by a country to get that person. So you have all of that's instantaneous. And if you come up positive as either a US warrant or a warrant from another country that belongs to Interpol, and 190 countries are in the Interpol system, then you're taken out of that and you're going to go to a room, and then Interpol or whoever's going to be contacted about that warrant, and you're going to be vetted. That's not happening standing out in the middle of the desert. So whether there's warrants or there isn't, it doesn't matter. They're letting the people in and telling them, okay, you want asylum or whatever, come back in 8 years and we'll talk to you. In the meantime, have a nice trip into the interior of the United States. Oh, by the way, here's some money. Here's some more stuff you might need, an airline ticket, you name it. And that's what we're doing. So, so the vetting is not happening. It could happen, but it's not happening. And especially when you have people coming in that manner, walking across or swimming across the border, the river, coming into the United States, and then can't be vetted immediately. They can check them for American warrants or American information, but to get that inquiry overseas and to have the information come back, and if it comes back that there might be a warrant issued by a country that belongs to Interpol, now what do you do with that person? Or you put them in the meantime. So they're just waving them into the country and off they go.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Tom. In closing, I believe the country is in grave danger in a number of capacities today. I think the border is one of them. I think the border is the greatest threat to our national security.
Well, when you're in grave danger, then something has to happen that proves it. And I think that's the problem right now. So you can have people say, we're in grave danger because all these people are coming in and we don't know who they are. But if years go by and there's no attack, there's no, the danger isn't manifested into an action that hurts Americans, then it's kind of like, oh, well, it's, crying wolf. We've heard that before, so what? And I think that's the problem now is that, yes, these people can do tremendous damage if they're the wrong person, if they're MS-13s, or if they're sponsored by the cartels in Mexico or by other organized crime groups from around the world. Yeah, if they come in and want to do something to American citizens, that would basically carry out the danger, prove that the danger exists. But the longer time goes and we don't have a major attack, we don't have a major incident, well, maybe that's all, fake information. Maybe we don't need to worry about it. And that's where the problem right now is that we have not been attacked recently in a significant way.
I wonder if Eric Adams would say his city's in grave danger because he's talking about it being destroyed. He's talking about the city of New York being destroyed because of the immigration problem. One thing, Tom, I do want to mention, with this border issue, we're watching cartels literally involved in handoffs to our border patrol agents, and from time to time entering our country with weapons, body armor, etc. Guys, this isn't fiction. This is fact. Don't take us on our word. Go let your fingers do the walking. Do a little research for yourself. You're going to find out things that Tom and I are telling you today are 100% true. We are not agenda driven. We're not trying to tell you who to vote for. To be honest with you, I am telling you the reality of this political landscape and how it's harmed this country, your energy sector, your economy, your foreign policy, your border. It just goes on, and it's irrefutable. And every time they tell you this was Donald Trump or this were the Republicans, that's just a bold-faced lie. If you want to know why your gasoline doubled, it wasn't because of Donald Trump. It's because we shut down the Keystone Pipeline. And just to go back a year or two, you had the president remind you that the reason your gasoline prices were so high was because of Putin. So basically what he was telling you, just to go back in a little bit of history, is that we positioned an adversary to have that type of impact or influence in our country and on our economy. Is that what you really wanted to tell me, Mr. President? Seriously? And you want to blame Donald Trump for 300,000 people across this border in December, or almost 800,000 have crossed since October 1st? That was the Republicans. And guys, and as Democrats, aren't you loyal to the country before you are to these bizarre, perverse, damaging policies? I think we've said enough for today, Tom. I thank you as always. We're going to be back again. Contact us at operationtruth@gmail.com. We need to hear from you. We want you guys to tell friends to listen to this and just try to spread this word. Maybe we can motivate the public who feels hopeless and helpless, I think, when it comes to changing things. They just sit here and they go like, well, what am I going to do? What you're going to do is you better get out and vote in November and figure out who's done what to whom in this instance, and just see the forest for the trees. Your cities aren't safe. Take a look at who's running them. That's all I have to say for you today. Tom, thank you again. TJ Stone, thank you for helping us produce this thing. And we'll catch you next week.
Thank you, Lou.
Thank you, Tom.